is 17 days and counting to the May 24th general election, and what a campaign is shaping up to be. Now, the two major parties have hit the campaign trail running, and the new parties are out and about. Now, last night we witnessed the liftoff of the Barbados Labour Party, and we await the campaign launch tonight of the incumbent Democratic Labour Party. Now, this is a campaign to look forward to. It's an election of our elections. Now, this is BT Campaign 2018, and it's a frank discussion and incisive analysis of the developments during the past couple of weeks. I'm your host, Emmanuel Joseph, and with me are our guests, pollster Peter Wickham and political scientist, and we also have Patrick Hoyos, veteran journalist, and he is also known for his business acumen. So we have a great panel here today. Gentlemen, we have 30 minutes, and we have a lot to talk about. So Peter, let's start with you. Now, the BLP launched its campaign last night with a mass meeting. I want to get your impressions of the numbers and the campaign itself. What are your impressions of the probably case that was made for a new government in the BLP?
Yeah. No, thanks for the invitation, Manny, and I'm happy to be here. The campaign liftoff was not a surprise, and I think that the BLP has benefited in a sense from two campaign launches. The unofficial launch, which was last week at the East Coast, and then this campaign launch last night. My feeling is that the East Coast set a stage in terms of the numbers. So there was an anticipation that last night would have been big, and it was big. It's one of the biggest political meetings I've ever been to in Barbados, if not the biggest. There were a lot of people in red, but what I thought was significant was that there were a lot of people wearing red that were not necessarily wearing BLP issued red. There were also a lot of people who were not wearing red who were supportive. And I thought that it demonstrated certainly that the public of Barbados the BLP has the momentum. People are listening, they're listening to hear the message, and the platform last night was not a lot of cussing. It was a lot of policy options being discussed, which was something that the BLP has been criticized for. The BLP also presented a united front, and I thought that was also significant because there was no visible indication of any tension in the ranks. Certainly the leadership was projected, and it was clear that the group was supporting the leader. And I think that all of that spoke very well for them. The Democratic Labour Party launches tonight, so then we see what can be answered, but already I have some concerns about the choice of location, the signal that's being sent where that's concerned. But for the time being, I would say that the Barbados Labour Party has not disappointed regarding how things have started off. Right.
Patrick, your take?
Well, I think that going into the election from economic or fiscal point of view, the DLP finds itself with nothing to show for its effort to balance the budget in 1 year. I think the key was last May when we had a budget that was draconian times 2 or 3. Much more so than any previous budget, when the Minister of Finance said he was going to raise in new taxes as well as in savings of expenditure and selling off state assets, that kind of trifecta, for close to $500 million in savings, which would have pushed the budget into a surplus and provided a lot more money so that we would have to borrow less to pay interest on our debt. It didn't happen that way according to the central bank, which put out figures giving you a preliminary snapshot up to the end of the fiscal year, which is March. And the deficit came in, no surplus, fiscal deficit 4.5%, and also the primary surplus came in at about 3.5% instead of, it came about 7.3% instead of 3.5%. So it was the performance was a lot lower than not only was said in a budget speech, which you would expect to be positive, but the government was really expecting to have this as the benchmark, if you like, on which to say, look, We took very dramatic measures, but we are in 2018, and look, things are coming up roses. And that not happening, however you cut it, it has not happened for many reasons, leaves the party at a very big disadvantage, with people saying, well, you're taxing us to the hilt, and yet the economy is still going down and the reserves are still going down.
Now, were you able to attend the meeting last night?
No, I didn't.
Right. Okay.
I watched some of it on Facebook.
Okay. One of the key things that Ms. Motley, brought up last night at the meeting was a sit down with the NUPW to work out a salary deal, and if that failed, to look at a cost of living allowance. What are your impressions about that deal, about that proposal? Or do you think that will work?
Well, that was the economic question.
Yeah.
So, politically, I mean, I think is reasonable. I think the relationship between the NUPW, between the unions and the Democratic Labour Party has broken down based on trust. I think that trust has been lost, and certainly if it wasn't lost before, when we heard the response to the most recent initiative where the government was trying to suggest that they had agreement with the private sector, with the unions, and then the unions said that there was no agreement. So trust is gone. I think it would make sense for the new government to engage the NUPW, and I think the concession of saying, look, we're going to put this on the table initially makes a lot of sense. So I think politically it's a good strategy. As far as the economics of it is concerned, I give way to my esteemed colleague.
Well, the thing is this, an economy is just basically how much people are spending, how much money is coming in and going out, how much turnover you're generating, even if you're not making a profit. So unlike a business like Barbados Today, which is supposed to show a net profit, a country really only has to show a great turnover. Oops, we didn't make money this year, but maybe next year. So you can run a fiscal deficit, but your economy is growing. Some companies can do that because they say, look, revenue is increasing by leaps and bounds, like Amazon, but we haven't made any money for 20 years, but still people are investing in it. Most companies are not like that, but countries can do it. In this case, we want to keep it simple. If you take a large part of your economy and depress it, which is wages, lack of jobs, lack of better jobs, increase in wages, upwardly mobile people, and that sort of sense that where everybody's moving up and spending more. And the grounds that you're doing it on is to save foreign exchange, which was one of the key grounds for these measures over the years. Then you are stabbing yourself somewhere about the body as well, because you are reducing the amount of money being spent in the economy, and therefore you are slowing your economic growth.
But Patrick, given the dire economic situation we are in, do you think that the country will be able to afford a salary increase?
Yes, I'll tell you why. If right now we are stuck at the end of a long set of assumptions, which start out fairly reasonable. If you don't have much money right now, well, let's not buy the new furniture or something for the house, or let's not go out tonight and eat at a place. And that saves a little money. But if you do that over and over and over, your whole standard of living goes right down. And you're not able then, when you go out looking for work, your clothes are not as good as they should be. You may be a bit unkempt. You look worried. You may be haggard, maybe from worry and not eating properly. And people lose confidence in you. So if you're a country, the same thing happens. The country starts to look worn, tired, and frayed. Morale goes down. And at the end of the day, it's foreign exchange that makes it all possible. Foreign investors look at us and say, or any country in this situation, and say, I'm going to take a pass for a couple of years till they get back on their feet. And that is our problem. You cannot tax it out of people or depress people. Yes, you are going to increase the cost of running the country. There are other things that will have to be done as well on the saving side. And nobody wants to use words like privatization, but certainly the present government, which made a big noise about it last time, is doing it. And every government has to think about that. And there are other ways as well. So you have to run your country better. And you have to plan and hope that the confidence that you engender will bring foreign investment in, which is where your foreign exchange comes from.
Okay, let's stay on the meeting, Peter. The DLP is promising some bombshells tonight. Do you think that we should be anxious?
I'm not anxious. My concern initially was, their decision to go up to the stadium. I don't know that the stadium is necessarily a shining example of the Democratic Labour Party's success. I mean, certainly they built it, but the disrepair into which it has fallen is not something I think they would want to celebrate. So my assumption is that they're going up there essentially to send a signal to the leader of the Barbados Labour Party that they're coming to speak to her in her own thing. Now, I hear about bombshells, and when I think about bombshells in the context of the DLP's offering, traditionally has been scandal. And my question is, the believability of any likely scandal has to be set against the believability of most of the stuff that the Democratic Labour Party has been saying. I really feel that the conversation that Barbadians are more interested in now from the DLP is a conversation about what the DLP has done and what the DLP can do for the next 5 years. How do you explain away the fact that, as Patrick just said, you promise a surplus, you promise economic growth, and you're not able to deliver on either? All of the other things that you said you would do, you haven't done. Let's have a conversation about that. But I do believe that the salaciousness of any potential bombshell is such that the DLP is convinced that they can offer that kind of conversation to Barbadians, and that Barbadians will respond well enough to it to reject the Barbados Labour Party. But I do believe that they're on the wrong track, if that's what they think. I think that Barbadians are more interested in hearing their defense of their record and their explanation of why things did not go well and what they're going to do to make things better. It is a strategic decision that they have to make, and I respect their superior prowess regarding strategy in the last election. But the fact is that I think this bombshell approach is a mistake. And I believe that, we had bombshells. We had one, it was 1991 in the stadium. No, it was in the Queen's Park, where there was this IMF letter that was supposed to have been read. That was a bombshell. It was a bombshell that never materialized. And I think that this is the point that they have to be careful about.
Stick with me, gentlemen. We'll continue discussion when we come back. This is BT Election Watch 2018. We'll be back in just a moment.
One night, one winner. Only one team can deliver. Balance, comprehensive, unrivaled coverage. Barbados Today, Capital Media HD 99.3, and 6 Gear Studios. Don't miss election night on www.facebook.com/Barbados Today, on www.barbadostoday.bb, live on www.capitalmediahd.com, and on www.facebook.com/CapitalMediaHD.
Welcome back to BT Election Watch 2018. I'm your host, Emmanuel Joseph, and our guests, pollster and political scientist Peter Wickham, and veteran journalist Patrick Hoyos. When we took the break, we were talking about the bombshells that the DLP promised tonight. And you, Peter, you didn't think it was a big deal, that anything that we should be anxious about. But what I want to switch to is the criticism of the DLP's readiness. And it is evident that the BLP has lots of stuff all over the place, and there's very little or anything from the DLP. What do you read into that?
I mean, I've heard the DLP explain that readiness is a perception, and that it is for us to know how we perceive ready and how they perceive ready. So I'm assuming that they have a masterstroke coming. And that's the best I can say. But I tell you, from all appearances, it looks as though the Democratic Labour Party has called an election for which they're not ready. The election was 50-something days late, and I think that it makes it even more scandalous that you've called an election late and you're still not ready. My feeling is that they should have been in a position to call an election and immediately after litter Barbados with paraphernalia and so on to suggest a level of readiness. And we have a situation where, almost 2 weeks in, and we're not seeing anything from them. So they have been saying that they know they're ready and they have a strategy that will pull them out. And we wait to see this strategy released. But I tell you, the more you wait and the more you promise, the bigger the bombshell has to be. And I think this idea that you're just advancing the bombshell is linked to this whole idea of lateness. So the election was late. That means that it has to come off in a really major way. So I'm anxious to see. My personal feeling is that, you know, a couple of things haven't happened the way they were expecting them to happen. The level of coordination in the DLP's campaign is not there. My concern also for them is that the General Secretary, George Pilgrim, who would once have been the person to do all of this, is now fighting for his own political survival in St. John. And that too was late. And I think that is complicating the whole factor that the people who should have been in the engine room of this thing, you now have them running for seats. While in terms of the Barbados Labour Party, it's clear that they have a strategy where you have people like Dr. Walcott and Billy Miller and so on in the engine room that are not fighting for their own political survival, and it makes it a little easier.
Okay, I want to look at the third parties because you, Peter, have not given them any chance, but they are saying that the two major parties have really outlived their usefulness, so to speak, and there's need for a third party. Interestingly enough, the former Prime Minister Owen Arthur said you shouldn't discount their impact. Do you agree?
No, I've discounted the impact. I have not seen anything data-wise, and I've been polling up to last weekend to suggest to me that they're going to have any major impact. I have fundamentally disagreed with a lot of what Arthur has said on this issue. I have noted that he has a special relationship with Barbados Today, where he's been able to come into your domain and repeat the same thing he's been saying for the last year over and over again regarding the third parties, but there's nothing statistically to suggest that they will have an impact. Look, if you have an election in which you have 6 vote majorities, like the ones that we saw in the last election, a third party can make a difference. Let's bear in mind that in this election, you are looking at something like 10 seats that the Democratic Labour Party holds that are less than 10% swing, right? Now, it does not suggest it will be a marginal election like he's suggesting. And the third party support or the new party support, at best, is amounting now to 1% of the total popular vote. The NDP got close to 20% of the total popular vote and didn't win any seats, you know. And then it won one subsequently when it came off, you know, in the next election, 2008 election. Richie Haynes, right, was able to win a seat subsequently, but initially it didn't. So the point is that if they are polling now at less than 1%, the likelihood that they will actually have an impact is I think that the whole thing has been overstated. And I think that there are not a lot of people that believe in this gospel that Owen Arthur has been peddling, that these third parties are going to be so influential. My sense is that the third parties are really about a vendetta. Certainly one of them is. A lot of the other ones, they have a genuine interest in making a change. But now that the rubber has started to hit the road as far as electioneering is concerned, they're realizing that this thing is no walk in the park. And I don't believe that any of them are going to make an impact sufficient to change the seats. I drew reference in another forum to the situation in Antigua, Barbuda, where you had a third party called the DNA that was led by a woman as well, that was an offshoot of the UPP. And even in her seat, she did not make sufficient difference to change the outcome there. I think we're going to see a similar situation here. I am curious, though, about the situation in St. John.
I think
Dr. McLean's candidacy will change things, because I feel, based on the last published poll, that the St. John scenario is now at a stage where it can very well be marginal for the Democratic Labour Party. And if Dr. McLean is able to take some votes away from the DLP, he could very well hand that seat to the Barbados Labour Party. So it's ironic that, contrary to what Arthur is saying, we're now in a situation where, in terms of statistically, I can see a concern for the Democratic Labour Party regarding the third-party candidacy of Dr. McLean in that constituency. But that's really the only one that I'm looking at the alternative vote in. I'm not looking at it in Bridgetown in any serious way, even though I am somewhat fascinated by the candidacy of Natalie, and I admire what she has done. But ultimately, I believe that she will impact on people who are not looking to elect a government. And I think that for them, the conversation about her is one that will be things. I think she will do well. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to impact on the outcome in that constituency. But yeah, St. John is the one where I'm seeing the third party or the third force impact.
Do you think that McLean has a chance to win?
I don't think he has a chance of winning, but I think he has a chance of affecting the outcome, which is really what third parties attempt to do. You want to change the course of action, of history, by affecting the outcome, and I think that that is what he is likely to do in St. John. But I don't believe that anywhere else there's a likelihood of that happening.
Patrick, you have a take on all this?
Well, in terms of what their plans or their offerings are, in all, Peter knows his stuff very well and it's fascinating, and I agree with him entirely. But the bottom line is that Barbados needs to create far more foreign direct investment than it has had in the last few years. It has been going down significantly, and it remains down. No matter which party you have offering themselves, new or legacy, they have to have plans for that, and they have to convince the people that they're going to give them a better deal and be able to pay for it. And I remember Mr. Arthur saying when he was trying to win the government for the first time, I remember him saying it out on President Kennedy Drive, and it struck me because there would seem to be he was playing up the fact there was a lot of infighting at the time in the Dems. Remember the 3 or 4 winged bird or whatever it was, and he was trying to build on that. And I remember him saying, "We are the only organized political force in this country." I always remember that. I think Barbadians want an organ. That's what most of them vote for. I like you, but why vote for you? Can't do anything for me. You get in Parliament, and you still got to merge with somebody to get something passed. I want to vote for an organized political force.
Okay, we'll take a break here and come back. And when we come back, we're going to look at the pulling out of Dr. Maria Ehrgard. This is BT Election Watch. We'll be back in just a moment.
One night, one winner. Only one team can deliver balance, comprehensive, unrivaled coverage. Barbados Today, Capital Media HD 99.3, and 6 Gear Studios. Don't miss election night on www.facebook.com/Barbados Today, on www.barbadostoday.bb, live on www.capitalmediahd.com, and on www.facebook.com/Capital Media HD.
Welcome back to BT Election Watch 2018. I'm your host, Emmanuel Joseph, and our guests, pollster and political scientist Peter Wickham and veteran journalist Patrick Hoyos. When we broke, we were talking about the impact of the third party, and Peter doesn't hold out any hope for them being an impactful force in this election. We want to switch, because we're into our final segment, we want to switch to the how you read the pulling out of Dr. Maria Ehrgard at this point in time from the United Progressive Party?
Well, I think Dr. Bell said it very well this week, that Dr. Maria Ehrgard was irrelevant to the political discourse when she ceased to be the candidate for the Barbados Labour Party, and nothing has changed. So I was not excited about her candidacy because I knew she wasn't likely to win or make an impact in that situation. And I think that what has happened essentially just speaks to the level of seriousness that she had in the first place. And I think that it has created some problems for the UPP to explain it, but fundamentally it's no surprise and it doesn't change anything. Yeah.
Patrick?
No, I never saw the relevance of any third party candidate, and especially I was intrigued that in the Ehrgard situation we had this, I may still be the courts, this idea that you can take your support and your thing with you. In other words, you have a sort of a right to a constituency if you leave a party. And I think it's been established that you don't. The party is the umbrella, and you can go somewhere else, but you will lose the party's support. So I still think it's a straight fight, and it may not even be a straight fight, because as we've said before, barring some huge revelation, which will more than likely be negative, unless they're going to announce some massive billion-dollar project or something. The Dems are not on par in popularity with the expectation that the Bs will win, and the political parties are just copying newspapers, basically.
Peter, we've noticed that this year there have been a lot of appointments in the public service. A lot of things seem to be happening. A lot of people have been appointed. I understand people have been getting back their refunds. So it seems that the government has been doing a lot of things now with the expectation that this will have an impact on the voters' psyche. Do you think that it makes any difference, really?
No, I mean, I think the difference is marginal, you know. I haven't really heard, I heard there was a promise of return income tax returns, but I haven't really heard a lot of people saying that they've received them. So that one is still out for debate, but it certainly has been an effort on their part to use things like appointments to try to encourage people to come around. But you know, fundamentally the issue is still there's a question of trust and too little too late. If you're saying that the people are voting on the extent to which they can trust the Democratic Labour Party, the fact that you have delivered on appointments that you promised after 5 years, I think is perhaps not going to be as significant as you may think. And again, I go back to this point that the more you promise and the more you wait, the better you have to deliver. So delivering a few appointments now to people at the level of permanent secretary and senior officers and whatnot, no, that's the conversation that we want to have. We want to have a conversation about the direction of Barbados, the overall economic direction, and the extent to which you can deliver on what you have failed to deliver for the last 5 years. I think that's where the conversation needs to go.
Given the central bank's recent report, whichever government wins, you know that they're going to have a big problem on their hands to deal with. How do you see the next government coming out of this problem or dealing with it?
Well, I'm anxious to hear Patrick on that, but for my own part, I expect that whichever government gets office is going to the International Monetary Fund. I appreciate that neither one of them wants to say they're going. The DLP has said they were not going, and the BLP hasn't said anything. But I expect that the majority of Barbadians are like me, and they understand the reality is such that we are in such a dire state. The faster we get to the IMF, the better. Let's start a program of economic restructuring. I don't know whether the BLP will commit to that in the course of the election campaign. I suspect they won't. But fundamentally, I think regardless of who occupies the seat of Minister of Finance, I think that we are going to the IMF in short order after the election, probably within days, if not weeks. Patrick?
But it's possible, and it won't be the end of the world. I'm not sure that it will happen in such a short time. I do think that we've been in this sort of conundrum where we keep going into more and more into the same tax and go down and tax and go down, nothing to show for it. I think that if the winner, in this case the BLP, if they win, because the Dems continue to do the same thing they've said, were able to come up with really credible and attractive policies for investment, break down some barriers to local expansion. For example, a lot of the unfair surtaxes, bound rates, whatever, on certain imports that are holding back a lot of businesses from progressing. If they look into that, work on the offshore sector a lot more and fight that battle, I think that they might have a 6-month window to do some road shows, as they call it, to go and sell Barbados as a destination to invest. And instead of looking to the same 4 or 5 projects that we've been looking at for the past 5 years, Four Seasons, Hyatt, the same tired old projects, if they got some new projects and new investors in, that might give us a breathing space to not go. Because if you go to the IMF, in the end, you've got to get that investment anyhow to get out of the IMF. So they may be able to do that first for a brief window and hope that that opens the window wider.
You think the promises that both parties might be making now, they'll be able to fulfill in the first year or so?
They're not going to be able to fulfill them in terms of a change in policy unless investor confidence returns and more foreign exchange comes in, and that also takes some difficult medicine, which would include reducing, merging, or shutting down some of our state-owned assets or selling off.
Peter?
Yeah, no, I agree with that assessment because, I mean, it sounds like it's coming from a practical economic place. The idea of saying, and I mean, noticed last night, Mia Motley was on the platform and she was talking about simple things like, you know, a few more buses on the road and a few more garbage trucks. I mean, those are the kinds of things you can deliver in 100 days. But the idea of saying to people that real change is going to come in short order, I think a package has to work. Confidence has to return, and when confidence returns, then we can start to see investment rolling in again. And I do feel that the sooner we get the restructuring agreement underway, the sooner investment confidence is going to return, and then they're going to start to build. But until such time as that happens, I think that we're going to look at probably a year or maybe even 2 years before we start to see any serious impact in regard to the economic situation. And then the recovery, my expectation is that the recovery is going to be a 10-year program. It took us 10 years to get ourselves into this mess, and I think it's going to probably 15. And I think it's going to take us at least 10 to get out. Yeah.
Okay, gentlemen, we are coming to the end of our discussion. Your parting shots, Peter?
Pat, that's all right. Peter's the one with the money. I don't think there's much more that we can add. Yes, you are completely right when you say this set of politicians say that they're going to carry on with the same formula because they think it's going to work, and the things that have been coming are still coming, jobs and new investment, etc. The other one, which seems to have the ascendancy from the polling and just looking around the country and so forth, is we have a different way. We are going to give people more money and so on. That will impact on the foreign exchange position, but we don't know what they're planning, but we have plans that will make that happen. Yes, they will probably all overreach like all politicians do, but at the end of the day, I think the public does not have any more confidence that continuing to be taxed heavier is going to make our foreign exchange reserves go up because it hasn't done it.
Peter?
Yeah, I think this is the Barbados Labour Party's election to lose, and I say that against the background that the 2013 election was also theirs to lose, and I think they succeeded in losing that one. So the question is whether the BLP will be able to learn from the mistakes of the past and will be able to prosecute this one better. I think that the Democratic Labour Party is in a less attractive position than they were in 2013, and it makes it harder for them to win. So I'm watching it against that background, and I think I will learn one of two things. I will either learn a lot about how the Barbados Labour Party can correct mistakes they made in 2013, or about how the Democratic Labour Party can stage a miraculous recovery for the second time and be able to win what will be a historic third term for the Democratic Labour Party.
Thank you
Post-independence.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Peter Wickham, pollster and political scientist. Patrick Hoyos, veteran journalist and businessman with a great business mind. This has been BT Election Watch 2018. I'm Emmanuel Joseph. Stay locked to our online platforms. That will be barbadostoday.bb and our Facebook page, as well as our partner HD, Capital HD 99.3 for more on Election Watch 2018.